Okay, type annotations now. And that will be the first bit of actual TypeScript code that we will have written. So far, we've been writing pure JavaScript, even though it is in a file with a TS extension, which means TypeScript, and also that we've been compiling it using TSC like that, and it actually works. What we're looking at there is just pure JavaScript. Okay. Now, also while I'm there, I'm saying compile, that TSC is compiling. Some people might call that transpiling. So TSC is transpiling. I'm using the word compile instead of transpile, only because TSC is an acronym for TypeScript compiler. Okay, so whether you use the word transpile to describe the compilation or transpilation process is up to you. I'm going to use the word compile. Okay, now type annotations. The IDE is giving us a clue what it needs here. These 3 dots under bar means bar implicitly has any type. It means that the IDE and TypeScript can't figure out what type that should be when you call the foo function. So foo baz here, when we hover over it, it's also telling us bar any, and the method is going to output a string. And even though this works, what we can do is help it to be sure of the type. So in here, where these 3 dots are, just after the parameter name, colon, and we'll explicitly say that the type is a string like that. So now we don't have those 3 dots showing us there's a potential confusion there, and that works correctly. And if I compile that again, and I look at the output, the pure JavaScript doesn't have the type annotation in it. It doesn't need to, because our TypeScript has ensured that the JavaScript is going to be well formed when it's output already. Okay, so what's the benefit of this, really? This helps us to make sure that when we call our function, we're calling it correctly. For example, I could say baz is a number 1. Now down here it's showing me an error. It's saying baz, argument of type number, is not assignable to a parameter of type string. So that's TypeScript now telling us, no, you can't pass in a number to this foo method. You should pass in a string. So when we could do that as well, that is now a string, and that is okay. Another thing, you could say, I want baz to be an array of numbers, 1, 2, 3, for example. Once again, the foo method is expecting a string, and baz is a type of number array. It's not assignable to a parameter of type string. So while we're developing, TypeScript is telling us what these problems are. Also, if I save that and try to compile that, it's not going to work. So TypeScript is just telling us, no, we're not going to let you compile that. So that's useful. But if I still want my method to accept an array of numbers, I could then type number array like so, and now that is valid. Control S. And if I try to compile that again, that will be okay. And this here is what the JavaScript version of this code looks like. It's very much simpler. And remember, this is an ES5 version of JavaScript. If I targeted that as ES6, target ES6, it's going to come out looking very much similar to my original TypeScript, except for the type annotation up there in the method. And also, I'm just going to close that so the IDE doesn't get confused. Okay, now we can also make our methods have optional parameters. For example, maybe I don't want to pass in any value to the foo method there. And here it's saying foo, it expects 1 argument, but got none. An argument for bar was not provided. Bar needs to be a number array. But let's just say I want the method to accept nothing as well. So I could put a question mark after the bar like that. And now that makes bar optional. That's an optional parameter. It can be a number array or nothing. S to save, and let's see that it works when I try to compile. And it does. JavaScript doesn't have that optional parameter in its language spec, so here it doesn't really matter. JavaScript allows you to do this. Remember, JavaScript is dynamically typed, so you can pass anything into a method, whether it's correct or it's wrong. But the TypeScript here is a way to make sure that when we develop, we don't forget the rules that we want to comply to. Okay, and this helps other developers too. So if another developer comes along and starts working on your code and it wants to pass in a string like ABC like that, that other developer is now going to know, I know you've got to pass in a number array, and they might think 1, 2, 3. No, that's incorrect. Okay, now that's okay. Okay, that's TypeScript helping us while we're developing. Now I'm just going to put everything back to it being a string. So string, and baz is now ABC, and foo, just passing in baz like that. That's good. Now I'm going to show you an option called union. Now union allows us to be even more explicit on what we can pass into our method. So bar needs to be a string, but we could say it needs to be a particular string. So we could say car, for example, or that pipe symbol means or bus, like that. So our method now, we need to pass in either car or bus. So down here, if I just change that to car, that's okay. We're using the foo method correctly now. Up here, it needs to be car or bus. If we try to pass pass in something else like a plane, it tells us wrong. No, can't use plane. It needs to be a car or bus. Plane is not assignable to a parameter of car or bus. Control S to fix that up. Now, let's say I wanted to pass in another type of parameter. I could add another or symbol. I could say a number. So we can pass in car, bus, or any number. So let's try a number, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's okay. But that number as a string is not okay. Okay, very good. Now, also, if this becomes a little overwhelming for you, you could actually get away with just writing any like that. And that means you can have anything you like for Baz. It can be a number like that. It can be a string. It can be a number as a string. And it could be an array like that. All these are okay. And you could even write null, and that would be okay. Now, I'm going to put this back to how it was again. So it needs to be a string. And I'm just going to pass in ABC like so. Now, auto inference. When I've declared Baz is a constant, so we cannot change it. It's declared as ABC. And ABC is a type of string, so that is okay. We don't have to say here that Baz is a string, and then we pass that in. That is also TypeScript, doing it like that. But that is unnecessary because the IDE in TypeScript already configured that out by how we declared Baz. Now, also note that it's a constant. So it's saying it's an ABC. So up here, we could also say must be an ABC like that, and that would be okay. But if we declared that as a let and hovered over it, a let means we can change the value of Baz later on if we want to. So it's declared Baz as a string like that. So a let means we can do Baz equals DEF and Shift-F to fix that. And that's okay. But if I declared that as a const, it's saying no, Baz needs to be ABC only. There we go. Okay. So when you're doing TypeScript, there's a lot of things that are unnecessary to type. So when you write your TypeScript, the less times that the IDE tells you you need to tell it what type something is, the better. That means you're actually writing well-formed JavaScript from the beginning, and that's ideal. So the less reliance that you use on TypeScript, the better. So I don't have to actually say string. So Baz needs to be a string, and that's called type assertion, or saying Baz needs to be a number, and then I would do that, and that's okay. But it's obvious that Baz is a number or number one because of how we've declared it. And once again, if you want to see the word number in a definition, you can use a let. And remember, let means we can change it. Anyway, back to being like so. So when you see code where the type is indicated when it's declared, often it's just very unnecessary. You can try and delete that, and if it still works and there's no errors, then that's a better way of using TypeScript. So I prefer to use auto inference as often as possible. It will save the amount of code that you have to do and save you confusions. Other forms of writing type annotations or asserting the type, you could say as string. That's just as valid as saying string like that. Or you could say like this, string. It's another way you might see type annotations being asserted in your code. Anyway, that's very good. It's all unnecessary. Remember, just like that is very easy to read. And I only needed to have one bit of TypeScript in my code for this to be valid. And just a reminder again of what it looks like without it. There's those 3 dots. The IDE and TypeScript can't figure out the explicit type that should be. So Control Z to undo, Control S to save. That's very good. And that compiles. And that's the ES6 form. And if I wanted to use the ES5 form, I could either do that or just leave it default. And that's how it comes out. Okay, excellent.